Have you ever watched a YouTube video where someone made something and you thought, I want to make one of those? Well, that's what happened to me when I saw these videos from Bootleg Custom Shop. Let me take you through my process. I started out working on the car. Not a fan of the earlier model's headlights, I decided to go with the Hot Wheels number 469 Hotbird, which I was able to buy on eBay and have delivered right to my mailbox for less than $9. I drilled out the single rivet in the bottom of the car and disassembled the pieces. I had some paint stripper left from another project and used it to strip the paint from the body of the car. Then I used my Dremel to remove the hood scoop and spoiler from the car. I used air dry clay to fill in the holes from the T-tops and the outline from the hood scoop. Then I did my best to build up the peak going down the hood. Switching over to the interior, I covered the entire piece with some khaki acrylic paint. Moving back to the exterior, we had a can of gloss black spray paint and primer that would adhere to metal in our garage, so I used it for a base coat. Unfortunately, it didn't look the same on the metal and the clay. The metal had the gloss finish, but the clay looked matte. I sanded the paint from the top and the hood. I had some clear nail polish in my desk drawer and wondered if it could fix the problem. So I applied the nail polish to the clay and tried the black spray paint again. It actually worked. I had a fairly even finish now. At least it was all gloss. I really couldn't tell you how many coats of that black I applied. Each coat seemed to even out the places where the clay met the metal, so I just kept spraying. While the black paint was drying, I got to work on the trailer. I had already printed out the drawing from Bootleg Custom Shop and cut the sides, floor, and roof from a piece of craft wood from Joann's. I used a miter saw to make these cuts. Maybe overkill there, but whatever works. I used a drill to put holes in the squares where the windows would be, and then used the Dremel to finish cutting them out. Unfortunately, I didn't realize how many squares were actually windows, so you'll notice throughout the video that more window holes mysteriously appear. I used wood glue to glue the sides and the floor together. The roof just sits on top. While the wood glue was drying overnight, I took the car home and applied the gold spray paint. How many coats, again, is anyone's guess. I reassembled the car and painted the chrome details with a metallic silver acrylic paint and a tiny paintbrush. I could already see my vision coming together. Adding the rest of the colors over the next couple of days, the car was finally finished. I tried to be as detailed as possible, but it's hard when you're working with such a small car. Now that the car was finished, I focused on the trailer, and no trailer would be complete without metal siding. I used sheets of aluminum foil. I pressed the foil over the thick part of a manila folder to make the lines. I glued my siding to the sides of the trailer with matte Mod Podge and cut out the holes in the siding with an X-Acto knife. I used a white primer spray paint that would stick to the foil to get the siding ready for paint. Luckily, we had beautiful weather that day and I was able to do this spraying outside. I brushed on the white, silver, and green acrylic paints. I originally painted the doors a cream color, but while the lines were getting harder to see on the siding, they popped out on the doors. I probably should have cut out the doors before gluing the siding on, as this was not the look I was going for. I started cutting up the windows while I considered a solution for the doors. I used the top cover from a store-bought pie crust to mimic the window glass. I drew on the plastic with a Sharpie and then used rubbing alcohol to clean it off. I started painting some of the details on the trailer: window trim, logos, lights. I also cut out rectangles from a piece of copy paper and glued them on with a glue stick to make new doors. The paper hid the lines from the foil just fine. I drew on the vertical lines with a pencil. I took some potting soil I had and dipped a Q-tip in it. I then rubbed the dirt all over the trailer because, as we know, Rockford's trailer looked pretty rough. Moving on to the roof, I painted it the same silver I used for the trailer. I had a silicone mold that I filled with hot glue. Once it was set, I cut the pieces into fourths and kept the best looking 6 for the roof vents. I painted the sides and bottoms white, leaving the tops alone. Then I glued them onto the roof. Now that the outside was done, I went back to the windows. For the smaller windows, I just Mod Podged some white tissue paper to the plastic to make a frosted look. Then I used the Mod Podge to glue the window to the inside of the trailer. For For the larger windows, I used an X-Acto knife to score lines in the plastic since he had the awning-style windows, and then Mod Podged them inside. I used a skinny double-sided foam tape from the Dollar Tree to add some dimension as I intended to make these picture windows. I cut small strips of the tape and put them around each window on the inside of the trailer. Then I printed pictures from the show on regular copy paper and stuck them to the other side of the two-sided foam tape. I also printed some green stripes for the awning on a scrap piece of white cotton fabric. You can do this by taping the fabric to a piece of paper and running it through your printer as normal. I formed a square out of some metal craft wire, wrapped the fabric around it, and glued it in place, leaving one side hanging over and cutting the curves into it. Then I hot glued it to the side of the trailer. In the middle of this, I decided I needed to add a porch light. I just drilled a small hole in the trailer, overfilled it with hot glue, and then outlined it with black acrylic paint. This way, when the light is on inside, the porch light will be on too. I also wound up adding 2 layers of the double-sided foam tape to the underside of the roof in an attempt to block the light from shining through between the roof and the trailer. I didn't want to make the tires. I thought that a small monster truck from Dollar Tree would be a great inexpensive donor. I underestimated the size of the tires on the small truck. Still not wanting to make my own, I just cut off the tops of the tires using wire cutters and my X-Acto knife and then hot glued them to the bottom. Nobody sees under there anyway, even on a real trailer, right? Now that I knew my trailer height, I needed to make the hitch and the stairs. I cut out rectangles for the hitch and risers for the stairs from an extra piece of foam poster board I had. I painted the rectangles in a piece of a bamboo stick silver and glued it all in place to make the hitch. I used scraps of cardstock to make the stair treads. I painted them green and the risers silver and then Mod Podged them together. Since I hadn't considered how they would stick to the trailer, I wound up hot gluing a tiny piece of the bamboo stick under each top stair and then hot glued the other end of the stick to the bottom of the trailer. I added another piece of the bamboo stick as a prop for the back, as once I had put a light in the back, it pulled on the trailer and tipped it. I hot glued it behind the wheels so it wouldn't be noticeable. With that, the trailer was done and it was time to start on the case. I had already added a hole for the light cord at the bottom of the acrylic back using my Dremel. I basically cut into the acrylic, but it didn't really cut through so much as it melted through. Anyway, I printed a picture of the cliff I found online and used a glue stick to glue it to the back of the acrylic case and set the trailer and car where I thought they should go to make sure everything fit well. I used a sheet of adhesive cork from Dollar Tree for the parking lot. I roughed up the cork a little bit to give it less of a brand new look. I mixed black acrylic paint with Mod Podge to paint the cork. I tried to dry brush on some gray to lighten it up, but the next day I felt like it still looked like new blacktop. I did a thick gray wash on it and it really helped. I used chalk to draw the line where I wanted the sand to start, used a paintbrush to apply Mod Podge to that section, and then poured on some sand I had collected from our favorite city to visit. I also added Mod Podge to the tiny potholes so some of the sand would stay settled in those. I drew on the parking space lines with chalk and then checked to make sure my sizing looked okay. I taped off the lines and stippled on white paint and then yellow paint, but there was still a good bit of bleeding, so I had to touch it up. It was starting to look like a real parking lot. I hot glued each rock into place. Those came from Dollar Tree too. Then I hot glued the trailer and car into place. I placed the acrylic pieces on the base and it was finally done. This shows what it looks like with the lights on in my office and off in the trailer, both lights on, and then lights off in my office and on in the trailer. Of course, that's all in the daytime. It was time to present this project to my husband. He labeled it as neater than piss and sent pictures to his friends, and decided to display the diorama next to our TV. Thanks again to Bootleg Custom Shop for the inspiration. We both love how this diorama turned out.